Okay, well, thank you for joining me, Sandhya Sriram, all the way from Thailand. You're very lucky to be in such a beautiful place. So thank you for joining me on Future Foods interviews. So you've stepped down quite recently from Shiok Meats, which is quite a significant company in the cultivated seafood space, and now you are working in a sort of consultancy position. And so could you start off by kind of telling us, sort of saying a little bit about yourself, and also what lessons did you learn as CEO of Shiok Meats?
Sure, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call myself lucky in this month in Thailand. It's pretty hot. It feels like about 50 degrees Celsius. So I would like to be in a really cold place right now. But yeah, the beaches are beautiful and the people are nice and the food's amazing. So yeah, it's beautiful to be in Thailand. But yeah, really nice to meet you and thanks for that question. So a little bit about myself. I am originally a stem cell scientist, was trained as a scientist with a PhD and so on, and was a scientist for many years. Sort of stepped into the world of entrepreneurship um, through my first company that started off as a science news website. And then I started a second one, which is a science events company, but all on the side because I didn't believe that I was a full-time entrepreneur. I was sort of doing it on the side because of passion as I was figuring out what I wanted to do as a day job. But in 2018, I realized that my day job should be being an entrepreneur, and that's when Shiok Meats was started. And I'm very passionate about the use of technology in daily lives, especially in food systems. And I wanted to be a part of that. I was reading about it for quite a few years, and then I decided to take the plunge and ran the company for about 6 years before stepping down as CEO about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think. Yeah, so that's sort of me and my story. And honestly, to tell you the truth, what I've learned, and I've sort of thought about this question quite a bit in the last couple of months to at least a year, and I've been asked this quite frequently as well. And I'm not a person to regret anything, so I don't think I would regret anything for sure. But two things that I did learn through that journey, and I think I've mentioned it in my LinkedIn post somewhere, but I mentioned that one thing that I would have definitely done differently was not grow the team as fast as we did. But that was also sort of this cascade effect of when you raise $30 million, you're sort of pushed to burn as well. So I think I would have done that a little differently if I could. And the second was if I had a bit more time to have done due diligence on certain investors before I took their investment, I would have done it. And I did have that luxury of doing that for the first 2 to 3 years when things were great in the market and we were really, a lot of investors wanted to invest in us, and we were always sort of oversubscribed. So we had the luxury of sort of choosing whom we wanted on our cap table. But as
Mm.
the industry sort of went through different phases, we had to take money as you can, and just take it and sort of run with it. But I wish I had a bit more time to do some due diligence. Yeah.
I see. So it sounds like you had some bad experiences with investors then.
Well, who hasn't? And
Yeah,
I'm sure the investor will say the same thing as well. Well, we have had really bad experiences with some startups and entrepreneurs. I think it goes two ways. And I mean, for me, in life and in career, I don't think you can make everybody happy.
right.
As long as the majority of them are happy and they're supportive of what we do, what you do, that's really important.
Mm.
So yeah, there are a few that probably are still unhappy with me, and I've had a couple of issues here and there, but it's all part of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you said that you would improve your due diligence. Is there a specific area of due diligence that you think you would be concentrating on?
Yeah, I would have definitely spent a bit more time on how do they liaise with their portfolio companies? Like, how are they micromanaging versus are they sort of hands off, or how are they going to support you when times are rough, for example? And I would have liked a bit more time to sort of speak to some of their investee companies to sort of know how they've been with those CEOs and boards and companies before to sort of get a feel. So I think that would have been my um, my due diligence that I would have done a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose if you're starting as a CEO and it's not really something you're used to, and then you have 30 million, you have 30 million to handle, that's quite a lot of responsibility, isn't it?
It is, but it came with, I should say this again, I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying by, I wish I could do more due diligence on investors. I think even till date, I would say 70 to 80% of our investors, and we had 50 plus investors for the 30 million. So it was a long cap table.
Mm,
And 70 to 80% are still supportive, still reach out to me, still are in contact with me. No bad blood there. And, everything is perfect. It's only that 10-20% that, like I said, you can't make everybody happy. But as a CEO founder, you want to make sure everybody's happy, like all your stakeholders, your team. You want everybody to be satisfied. And yeah, I just felt that not everybody was. So I don't want people to misconstrue that
yeah,
most of our investors weren't great. They're amazing. They were amazing, and they will be amazing. And I've had a couple of them tell me, if you start something else in the future, we'll come and invest in you as well, because we
okay.
know that you'll do a good job. So I think that's confidence that, yeah, I've done something right
Mm,
in the past as well. But yeah, it's just something, because people kept asking me what would have you have done differently. So I had to think a lot to sort of get to those two answers per se. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I suppose in this space that there is, investors have an understanding that it's going to be a long wait before they see a return on their investment. So
Yeah,
you have to be patient,
yeah,
number one,
for
right?
sure, for sure. I mean, again, those 70 to 80% of our investors are those kind of investors who are extremely patient, supportive. They know things are getting hard for everybody. And they are, in fact, a good percentage of them, if we had sort of fundraised, let's say this year or next year, without doing the merger, they would have still come in and sort of done follow-ons. So,
Mm,
to sort of keep the company afloat and get there. Thankfully, finance wasn't an issue for Shiok Meats. We were well funded. We had a good runway. That wasn't the issue. I think two of the issues was, one was the technology hit certain road bumps on sort of the scale up, and which we were always sort of open about, and we had to cut back on a lot of things. We had to sort of take few steps backward to sort of figure out how do we scale up, how do we move forward. And second of all, I think my co-founder and I was just burnt out. It's the truth of the matter. We are human. 6 years of running a super niche pioneer company, first in the
yeah,
world to work on shellfish, first in Singapore to work on cultivated. We're sort of building a whole ecosystem in an industry, just not Shiok Meats. And I think we
mm,
were quite burnt out, and we still we have very strong belief on the industry and the technology and the company and all of that. It's just personally we were burnt out as C-suite people. We
mm,
would have, we if you had given us a scientist job, we might have taken it up in the company, like without the pressure of being on the board and the C-suite. But yeah, it just came to a point where we said, okay, it's
yeah.
time. Let's look at what next. Yeah.
I suppose that was the position where you wanted some investors to kind of step in and kind of help out a little bit with the management and the
Yeah.
company. Yeah.
Yeah, and they did. They definitely did. I mean, I should say a good percentage of our board was extremely hands-on for the last 1 year. I mean,
Mm,
I don't think the merger would have happened without them. They've been extremely kind and helpful and almost operating day to day. It's not
mm,
easy as a board member to do that, especially some of them aren't even in Singapore, not even in the same time zone. So, they've been
mm.
really hands-on, and I'm so glad that we all got to work together to sort of get that over the line. And here we are. Yeah, the
Okay.
merger is completed, and yeah, looking forward to the next phase.
So I assume you still have a stake in Shiok Meats.
Yes, I do. I'm very much a shareholder. Yes.
Yeah. So are you very optimistic about their future?
I am. See, I think it was quite interesting to don different hats as shareholder, board of director, the co-founder slash CEO. And at the end of the day, it came down to being a shareholder. And my true belief is that this industry will scale. It will take time. I always knew it'll take time. I always knew the company needs more time as well. But I think with the merger with Umami's sort of, similar seafood, Singapore, similar technology, similar understanding of the technologies. And they have a great team. I should talk about that as well. So I think, putting all of that together, and I'm a true believer in consolidation in a new industry. I wouldn't have said yes to the merger if I didn't believe and if I was not optimistic. So I'm very much am, and I do believe that it will grow. And I'm going to be there to be supportive and make sure we get through that line as well.
Yeah. So in regard to, because you had some concerns over scale up, have those concerns been removed now?
To a certain extent, I don't think there are concerns that can be sorted overnight. Also, in the last 12 months, the company has gone through quite a bit. The merger can sort of displace a lot of things in terms of team and infrastructure and so on. So I don't think for the last year we have done as much R&D or scale up as we would have done if we didn't do the merger. So I think a lot of effort was put into the legal, due diligence and a lot of regulatory
Yeah,
and
yeah.
getting those signatures in papers to sort of get that over the line. So I don't think we have spent as much time in the lab as a team. So, but
Yes.
that will change now. So I think with that, the scale up issues should be sorted. Yeah.
I suspect there's some big issues over IP, isn't there, when there's a merger like this?
So not really. In terms of all the IP that was created under Shiok Meats is owned by Shiok Meats, and Shiok Meats is still going to stay on as a legal entity. So with the merger, the company is still going to be there. The IP is going to still be with the company. Of course,
Okay.
there'll be a parent company that'll sort of hold all the IP. And in fact, we just got Shiok Meats' main patent got approved in the EU recently, just as of a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, I think that was not one of our worries during the merger. It was quite clear we had structured it very well from day one. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, as we're on the subject of scale up, what do you think is the main barrier to scaling up then? What was the problem?
Three things actually. And the first was capacity building, and capacity building can be taken as infrastructure, supply chain, raw materials, access, as well as partly talent team. You can put that under capacity building. So that was a little bit of a gap given that we were in a very small market, very small country called Singapore. Even though, they are very supportive of food technology, it is a small country. And we ran the company mostly during COVID. We
Yeah.
started off end of 2018, and then 2020 COVID hit. And we ran the company virtual for a very long time. And it wasn't easy getting the best talent and getting that infrastructure in place. The second was the unknown, because we did shellfish and there was so little known about stem cells in shellfish. There, even today, if you go look for research, background research, you wouldn't find much. So, that was a big challenge for us from day one, but we knew that from day one. And I think that kept us excited that there is so much unknown that we can sort of go after it. And I
Yeah.
think the third eventually was a gap between I'm sorry, a gap between sort of the expectations of the team, the investors, the market versus the reality of where the technology actually is and the scale actually is. And it's very hard to put it in words, even though you want to put it in words as eloquently as you can. But I think that gap will continue to stay, but the gap is closing in slowly.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, sorry. Yeah. I suppose in 2022, there was a lot of noise, a lot of enthusiasm, wasn't there, around kind of cultivated meat. But in 2023, it started to fade. So I mean, was this where investors started to kind of realize that actually the kind of science perhaps isn't as far as advanced as they'd hoped?
I think it was a combination of two things. One was, unfortunately, there were some companies that overpromised to an extent where it was sort of unbelievable.
Mm,
And there were a good part of companies, including us, that started bringing the industry a little down and started explaining reality to them a little bit to
mm,
sort of be open about it. It was that. And the second was, over time, investors educated themselves and became more intelligent, which is good, which is needed for the industry. And the industry needed to correct itself for valuations and for the rounds they were raising and sort of make sense of the numbers. And
Yeah.
this is sort of what every novel industry goes through. As of just this morning, I read a news that there's a 19 or a 29-year-old, I don't remember, but he is building like an AI startup in the US and he just got a valuation of 2 billion in his seed round. And I was like, okay, that's
Yeah.
a rise and fall story that is probably going to come out soon.
Yeah.
That sort of a thing. And yeah, you want to be closer to reality, as entrepreneurs in deep tech startups, you want to definitely overpromise a little bit. You want to think of the bigger vision and, the grander vision, but you have to have a foot in reality. You have
Mm,
to be honest about it. And if
mm,
things don't work out, they don't work out. It's not because you didn't try doing it. You tried it and it didn't work out. And at the
yes.
end of the day, you're dealing with cells that are biologically alive. It's not a chip or yeah, it's not a piece of hardware that you can just tinker and
Yeah.
put together. Actual cells that are living and they have their own mind, if you can think of it. And you can
Mm,
only push them to a certain extent of doing things. So I think it was a thin line between that, but now the industry is solidifying that line and eventually understanding that, okay, this is what it is and it's here to stay, but it's going to take some time to get there. And I think for the last 2, 3 months, we are listening to a couple of companies actually raising some rounds. One company in Singapore just got the regulatory approval after waiting for a couple of years. So things are moving, but not as fast as they were. But I
mm,
also felt it was too fast in 2021 and 2022. So
right.
probably the market's getting to a right point now. Yeah.
Okay. And should we expect regulatory approval for Shiok Meats at some point soon?
Not in the next year for sure. Maybe in a couple of years, that's what Umami is going to work on as well. But the plan is that I'm just quoting what the CEO has said as well, but they are looking to launch their fish product first, which I think is in the regulatory process, while
Right.
they figure out the scale up of the shellfish as
Okay.
it gets regulatory. Yeah,
Okay. I suppose there's a race to be the first seafood product to get regulatory approval between like you and Blue Nalu
agreed.
and kind of
Agreed. That
yeah.
I think, but I think it's not anymore a race where it's not as heated as a race anymore. I think now it's more like, okay, let's get at least one seafood product to the market, be
Mm,
it any company around the world. I think it's more of that. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's so now you've moved on to more of a consultancy
Yes.
role. So how will you be looking to kind of influence and to share your experience and knowledge in the industry in that role?
Yeah, so I just started taking up a couple of projects in the plant-based sort of fermentation-based precision fermentation, as well as a little bit of cultivated as well. But it's more about, the two passions that I have. One is how do you as a scientist or sort of a scientific person, how do you run a company, mentor such entrepreneurs to sort of get over their fears and get through that line of business versus wet lab, sort of a thing.
Mm,
And then the second is also, I'm quite passionate about fundraising. I think I did it pretty well. And, I've maintained a good relationship with investors. It's not easy maintaining a cap table of 50 plus investors over 6 years to sort of, get them over the line and get all the signatures in for a merger as well.
yeah.
I'd like to get entrepreneurs to sort of hear from me, share experiences of theirs as well as to how they do things. Where can I help? It can be as simple as an advice sometimes that, oh, you should write the email this way. It can be as simple as that. But sometimes when you're an entrepreneur and doing 100 things, the obvious is not seen in front of your eyes. And sometimes you just need a sounding board. So that's what I am. I've also, taken up, I've done some angel investing in the last couple of years. So I'm a bit more active with these entrepreneurs, trying to get them over the next phase of where their startup wants to be and so on. Yeah.
Okay. So you are consulting on how to persuade investors to part with their money.
In this market, especially in this
Yeah.
market, like what would attract them and what would get them over the line of supporting. And I should say, I just got an email from one of my investee companies that she just raised a bridge round as of last month. and she started raising only in January. And I was like, wow, that's great. So things are moving in the right direction, and I'm happy to be helpful.
Mm.
I am still very passionate about the industry, and I just want to be as helpful as I can. Yeah.
Okay. So do you see a turnaround that's, have we hit bottom and now perhaps we're kind of coming back up again?
Yeah, I think we went too much like that, like the hockey stick sort of went too high,
Mm.
but we didn't come fully crashing down. I think we sort of went somewhere in the middle, and now I think we'll just be like this. Maybe a little bit of a high would be good in a couple of years, but I think slowly and steadily. Yeah.
Okay. And when do you think it's likely we might see cultivated seafood on the supermarket shelves?
From what I've been hearing around the industry, I think in another 12 to 18 months is what I'm hearing that one of the companies should get, if not earlier, actually, because I do know a couple of companies in the US that have submitted for regulatory approval quite a fair bit ago. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that one of them get it soon, and I hope that it's in 2024.
Okay.
But if not, I think in the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah.
Mm. I did hear Anthony Chow from Agronomics say that blue mallow is kind of is predicted to come on to get regulation 2024.
Oh, great. Perfect. Yeah. So
Yeah.
one seafood company. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so you are clearly hopeful about the future
Oh,
of cellular agriculture.
definitely hopeful, definitely optimistic, but just wanting to again reiterate the timelines. I think people have to be quite open-minded, very patient, and give it at least another 10 years for it to be some sort of mainstream. And I
Okay.
don't know what that mainstream will be. Do you call it on the shelves of supermarkets versus more restaurants, or yeah, but some sort of mainstream, it will take a good 7 to 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose attitudes have got to change, don't they? Attitudes because there's a lot of negativity around this industry and around the sort of plant-based industry.
Yeah, attitudes. I think the media was extremely positive and optimistic of the industry a couple of years ago, but now they're sort of, poking holes, as they should with every industry. I have no qualms in that. And, that sort of brings a lot of entrepreneurs and companies into some sort of reality and speaking the truth as well, which is good.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, just be optimistic. It will get there, but just be very, very patient. It's an extremely large industry. It's food, it's emotion, it's multi-trillion dollars. You can't expect it to change overnight. And I also don't think plant-based and cultivated companies want to change it. They want to change the way of food production that is better for the environment, animals' health. I don't think they
Mm.
want to change the industry itself, if you know what I mean. Yeah,
No, they want to give an alternative,
exactly.
a
That's the idea
choice.
behind the whole. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think, I know it's at COP28 this year, they're at the first stage of a three-part roadmap which includes a kind of change to encourage people to eat less meat, I suppose. So,
Yeah.
with that in mind, and sort of some countries, especially sort of Scandinavian ones and sort of Singapore has been quite helpful with encouraging this sort of thing. So do you think governments generally are doing enough, or do you think they could do more to encourage the growth of the industry?
I think they definitely can do more. In fact, one of the biggest bottlenecks has been the long processing time for regulatory approvals. I think that can be definitely speeded up a little bit with a lot more experts being involved in the review process. I'm not telling to not do as much review. I'm saying more the review, the better, sort of make sure the product is extremely safe for human consumption, but do it faster.
Mm.
Maybe a lot more eyes and brains will make that happen faster. But in general, yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking if you're holding a conference, for example, and it's a 4-day event, why not do it animal free? I mean, it's not like people can't survive without eating meat just for about 3 or 4 days, and that sort of sets an example that will change the percentage of meat consumption a little bit over time. you can make some better choices instead of telling people don't eat at all. I think
Mm.
that humans, especially when you tell them not to do something, they want to do it more, right? And it is
Yeah.
human tendency to do it. It's just those small changes that can happen. And if a large event like COP 29, I think this year, yeah, but if 29, if they go meat free, that'll be one of the biggest statements that you can have, right? And especially if it's a climate conference. So yeah, hoping things change over
Yeah.
time.
I mean, it's a strange situation that we're in, really, because we have kind of populist governments springing up around the world, like in the USA and the UK as well, are arguably. So they, you know, even though in private or they kind of legislate to encourage more or kind of less advertising aimed at children or kind of less advertising of meat or something like that, kind of politically they are trying to kind of get the message across that they support meat eating and that they are against, any kind of changing of people's habits because they know that it'll look bad on their,
Yeah,
their kind of voter roll.
I mean, again, for governments and politicians, you have to try to keep everybody happy to an extent, right? Or a majority of population. So you want to seem really practical, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind you are running for your next term as well at the end of the day, and you want the voting population, as you mentioned, but also sort of strike that balance. And it's hard. It's super hard as an entrepreneur, as a politician. I sort of draw a lot of parallels between being in the government and being an entrepreneur many times. It's sort of
Mm.
this very awkward place to be in where you have a lot of conviction and you want to do a lot of things, but you get into the system and you're like, okay, I was fine when I was at the back of it, and,
Yeah.
not in the front of it. So it's an interesting balance.
Did you
Yeah.
find it quite easy or quite supportive in Singapore with the government?
Oh, very much. I think Singapore is one of those really supportive, open governments, but at least, I mean, there's a reason behind it. We don't have an agricultural population. We don't produce any of our food. There is no lobbying. There are hardly any farmers. So it works great in a country of 5 million people where we produce 10% of our food and we import 90%. But would that work in somewhere in Europe or US? Is definitely, the answer to that is a no.
Yeah.
So Singapore is probably one of those too good to be true countries sometimes, sort of that its own bubble with, yeah, all of that. So they were extremely supportive, with grants and with support, with media, with access to investors, even access to food companies and their connections, because Shiok Meats is essentially a B2B company, and so is Umami, where we want to license out our technology to other food companies rather than going B2C. So we had
Yeah.
that vision and strategy from day one. Both that's why one of the other reasons for a merger as well. And Singapore government is excellent in sort of getting us across that line and leading us up, leading us into these food companies that were really hard to get into sometimes, and
Mm.
making them understand that, hey guys, we're not against you. We want you to diversify the way you're producing seafood. Here's a technology that we believe will be better in the long run. So why don't you take a small bite of it, pun intended, and then look at whether you want to grow this in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's I mean I suppose it's farmers are quite unhappy about this industry. They see it as a threat. I mean certainly in Europe and in France and
Yes.
places like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by it. I think it was a natural lead into that. Unfortunately, it has come to a point where certain states or countries have legally banned cultivated meat from ever launching in their state or country, which I think is unfair, but that's for another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this sort of protest by the farmers, or sort of, being worried and sort of questioning the need and so on, is great conversation starter. And it's a great window and door to open into how can these two sets of people work together. And
Mm.
in fact, I am very passionate about this nonprofit called Respect Farms. They're based out of Netherlands, and they are actually trying to exactly do that. So they come from a non-cultivated, non-farmer sort of a background, but they come from a food and technology background. And they're saying, how do we put these two people together and create an open conversation about it. And in fact, their vision is to put a bioreactor on a farm.
Mm.
That's exactly what they want to do. So what they're trying to do is convince a couple of Dutch farmers to set aside, if I'm not wrong, 5% of their farming land to try to put in a bioreactor inside and see if they can produce meat the traditional way and meat in a bioreactor, and if that farmer can sell both. And
Yes.
that's their ultimate vision. So I'm very supportive of that. I think we need to get that, sort of collaboration in place. But it's really hard getting there. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's Respect Farms, isn't it? Ira Van Helleven.
Yes,
Yes, yes,
exactly.
I've
Yeah.
spoken to
Right.
her. Yeah,
Oh, great. Yes.
yeah. So, I mean, one last question. So if you were to start a new company in the cultivated meat space, would you stick to seafood and shellfish, or would you do something different now?
I would have definitely, I'll restart a company in seafood if I can. Definitely.
It
I'm still
would be.
passionate about overfishing, seafood, Asia. I think those are my key interests and what I know about also. And I think the price point at the end of the day makes sense for seafood, given that the seafood prices are rising as we speak and the demand for it is also rising. So I
Okay,
think just thinking practically, I would definitely do seafood again.
okay. All right. Well, thank you for talking to me. So you've moved to Thailand recently. I suspect that's a sort of quality of life. Is it like a pace of life decision? Is that why?
It's definitely a pace of life decision more than, yeah, like I said, I was burnt out. I was really tired, and it was time to leave Singapore, which was home for about 15 years for me and my family. But yeah, took a leap of faith and moved to Thailand, closer to a beach to sort of get some fresh air and breathe and figure
Yeah.
out what's my next steps and what I want to do on the professional life in the next couple of months. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I look forward to seeing what happens next, and perhaps we can have another chat at some point in the future.
Sounds good, Alex. Thank
It's
you
been
so
lovely
much.
talking to you. Thank you for coming on Future of Foods interviews.
Thank you.